for coming out on a Sunday evening so that we could talk about the issues that are most important to us in the community in the year that's gone by. What I've started to really internalize as a member is that for Jackson Heights, which is one of the most diverse districts in America and certainly the most diverse area of the world, foreign policy is domestic policy. I was shocked when I found out that actually there is no requirement for a member of Congress to do casework. There's no requirement, and in fact, many members of Congress can turn away undocumented people, and they can turn away immigrant casework, and they can discern what kind of casework they engage in. And I'm very proud to say that from day one, we had a 100% sanctuary policy, open door. If you are a constituent, if you are a human being that lives in New York 14 and you come into our office a block down, we will help you. And we've had that open door policy since day one. It's led to over 700 cases open by our small but very mighty team here in the district office. And we've successfully closed, out of those 700 or so cases that have opened, we've successfully closed 500 of them. Meaning that we dragged in the CEO of Gilead, a big pharma corporation. This one of my staffers, a 23-year-old young woman in my DC office, was listening to HIV activists from New York City. They came down to DC, but we also met with them here, and they found out that there was a Yale School of Law study found that it was actually the public, the CDC or one of our research agencies, actually the patent for PrEP belongs to the public, which is what they found. But meanwhile, a big pharma corporation, Gilead, just took it without even asking, without any sort of consent, and they developed, they started producing PrEP, and they started charging $2,000 a month for medication that prevents the transmission of HIV. They're charging people $2,000 a month, and frankly, even city governments that have made the commitment to make PrEP free at the point of sale, still burdening city governments $2,000 a month when they were charging $6 for the same drug in Australia. And so we dragged them in, and thankfully, and this was under the leadership of people like Elijah Cummings, incredible honor to serve under his leadership, to understand his soul and the spirit of his leadership, because unlike 99% of people in DC, he actually cared about centering and uplifting freshman members, because the whole place is stacked on seniority.
Alexandria just said she represents us. And we need to realize that when we vote for people, they are supposed to be representing us.
Yep.
We should acknowledge, appreciate, and support those people that are not representing us. And I hope I'm not causing a problem, but those people who are not representing us, we should show them the door. Part of the reason why we don't have a representative government as much as we should is because we elect people and they do crap, and we elect them again. And then we say, why is there so much crap around?
And so that's, pardon?
1.5 in CUNY.
1.5 in CUNY. And so we need real tuition-free public college in the United States. And it was thanks to CUNY organizers that brought this history up to me, to tell the history of how CUNY went from being tuition-free to tuition-charged. And the reason for it, and this is where it's real important that we connect the dots, was because when CUNY started charging tuition was when CUNY started to become racially integrated. A lot of people don't know that. And that's the story of many of our public systems, which is 1960s, people fought to integrate our school systems, to integrate all, public spaces. They fought for their civil rights. And then the moment that happened, the moment the Civil Rights Act got passed, and the moment we started to achieve integration, that's when we started moving to economic segregation. And that's when we started calling, this thorny rose by other names. And so instead of segregating by race explicitly, we started using all of these proxies. And that happened over and over and over again with many of our public systems. But the story of charging tuition to CUNY is a very explicit and exemplary one. The other thing too, there's been this debate about Iowa and New Hampshire being first in the nation. In Iowa and New Hampshire, the whitest states in America became first in the nation? 1969. So there is a larger story here. And it's this idea that we should maintain systems of injustice, because what happens if we give one person too much? And I'll make it very clear. All of these systems are human-made, right? Which means none is ever gonna be perfect, right? So sometimes we've gotta choose which mistake we're gonna make. And this is the other thing too, it's like, we truly have forgotten what government that works for us looks and feels like. But the GOP tax cut costs the US about $2.1 trillion. You know how much it costs to forgive all student loan debt in America, private and public? 1.7. Wow. So you reinstate that tax cut, and you could potentially use those offsets to forgive every single student loan in the United States of America and still have some change left over.
How do you gauge actual steadfast support for the Green New Deal and really everything that getting us a voice at the table currently in Congress, and what will be the tipping point? You know what I'm saying? You need support that can push through and actually in the face of the corporate-owned Democratic Party establishment.
No, there are absolutely challenges. Thank you. Because similar to Medicare for All, there are a lot of people who will co-sponsor a bill that don't actually support it. And they co-sponsor it because they get spooked into it by their own constituents. But it always depends on the relationship that a given member has with their community. Like, are they scared of their constituents, or are they like really trying to see how their constituents feel and advocate for their positions? There's two types of support. One is, do we have the support of the people? And that we do. 70% of the depending on what poll you look at, about 70% of Democrats are supportive of the Green New Deal. Not only that, but in our recent visit to Iowa, we really saw that actually in communities in the state of Iowa, climate change is a top 3 voting priority for the caucuses.
My mom is a lifelong Democrat, never watched Fox News, has a chronic disease, and when she has insurance, every month she's paying hundreds, without it she's paying thousands. The last 3 years, my stepdad has lost his job twice because of downsizing, and when they do not have health insurance, they are in trouble. And basically what's happening now is they have had to put off retirement for years. At this rate, they're not going to retire until they're about 70.
How old are your parents now?
My mom is 64, because they're constantly having to catch up to pay in between jobs. Yet she is against Medicare for all, because she believes what she's hearing on ABC News and from all the centrist Democrats. How do we change this discussion and tell them the reality of it?
I'm telling you straight up, I am a member of Congress. Members of Congress get Obamacare exchange insurance, and so we are subsidized to having a gold level insurance plan. That's what a member of Congress gets, okay? Full transparency. I would give up my gold plan in a minute for Medicare for all. For a lot of reasons. One being that any insurance plan, whether you have like double, platinum, diamond, whatever, First of all, there should not be gradations in care. First and foremost. I am not a gold person and like you're not a silver person. That's not how this works. Everybody deserves a full level of care. So there's I think for a lot of people, they respond to one of three arguments. They respond to a moral argument, or they'll respond to a political argument, or they will respond to an economic argument. And usually when you argue for an issue, if you include one of those three things, or all three of those things, it'll hit some kind of point for some people.
That's 700,000 Americans, 50,000 New Yorkers are going to lose SNAP in about 3 months because Mr. Trump and Mr. Steve Miller wants that to happen. What can Congress do to protect Americans?
When it comes to immediately undoing what he's done, it's very difficult for us to do that. And that's why oftentimes when things like that happen, we have to work creatively with the city and the state to see how can we expand that on a local level and maybe get funding to the state at an increased level, but then the state and the city oftentimes has to clean up the mess that the White House is making. I've heard a lot of people try to defend this decision from the Trump administration because the rule change is that it imposes, the way that they're actually taking SNAP away is that they're imposing work requirements on people who are 18 to 49 to access SNAP. And then they'll say, oh, don't worry, it's only childless people. Oh, don't worry, it doesn't include the disabled, and so on and so forth. But anyone who's ever had the experience of having to access any kind of system like this, whether it's Medicaid or whether it's SNAP, WIC, EBT, etc., knows that all of that means critical paperwork that can sometimes take months to clear. And when you're talking about food, people don't have months. And a lot of the time, when people are in a state of desperation, they'll have disabilities that are notoriously difficult to get approved and certified as a disability. Or you may have a disability that's very difficult to recognize, especially if you're struggling with mental illness. And for so many people, when it comes to being covered by disability, there's also there's inequality there too, because you need to be able to have the resources or the education yourself to be able to advocate for yourself in a system that constantly fails our disabled neighbors. The vast majority of people who can work do. Almost every single time. And also, one of the big issues that we have when it comes to SNAP, EBT, WIC, etc., one of the big issues that we have is that we allow employers to pay people little enough that they have to rely on SNAP in the first place. This is a wage issue, this is a healthcare issue, this is a cost of living issue, because no person who has a job should be making so little or should be getting paid so little that they're relying on public systems. And when we talk about handouts, that doesn't mean that it's a handout to a person. It's a handout to a corporation. It's a handout to Walmart. It's a handout to Amazon. It's a handout to all these people that think that they should be able to pay people less than a living wage. But what we're showing is that I think something more permanent is changing. And I think this community is the seat of that change, is a seat of that change, but it's happening all over. Because guess what? Rashida wasn't supposed to win. Ilhan wasn't supposed to win. I mean that in a very real way. Because they were both running in open races, and they had DCCC candidates that they were running against. They literally were not the pre-chosen ones. Ayanna wasn't supposed to win, but also there were a lot of members, even in more swing seats, that won that were not the chosen D-Trip candidates. I wish we could talk about that sometimes a little bit more, but there are a lot of members of Congress this year that ran that were not the party's pre-chosen ones, and they won anyway. And no one wants to let that secret out. No one wants people to know that. But there's something really happening, but we have to stay at it. We really need to stay at it. And so with that, I thank you all so very much.